So I'm Amy Tobin. I'm an associate professor in the Department of History of Art here in Cambridge and also a curator at Kettle's Yard. I'm also a co-director and chair of Cambridge Visual Culture, which is why I'm here this evening. Cambridge Visual Culture is a kind of organisation that brings together anyone with a passion for visual culture in the University of Cambridge and more broadly across the town. We organise lots of different events. We have a visiting fellows programme, and we really welcome you to join those events and to join in our wider programme at any time. You can find out about it on our website. You can also sign up to our bulletin, where you find out about all kinds of things that are happening in relation to arts across Cambridge. Tonight, it's been a great honour to organise this event as the CVC with the Women's Art Collection at Marjorie Edwards College. Thank you, Harriet, for the invitation. We're incredibly glad to be welcoming a distinguished panel of guests, Professor Judith K. Brodsky, Dr. Ferris, Olin, and Marjorie W. Martay. Tonight's event will focus on a presentation by Professor Brodsky, and then a conversation by Dr. Olin and Marjorie Martay. I'm going to start off by just introducing Marjorie, and then Marjorie will introduce Judith and Ferris. So, Marjorie W. Martay is co-executive director of City Limits, artw.org, and Women We Create. She's a champion of the arts and a seasoned business professional located in New York City. She was the founder and executive director of artw.org, an organization committed to promoting women artists by means of advocacy, curation, and education. And she also launched Women We Create, experimental journeys that showcase notable women artists across a variety of disciplines. She's also currently co-executive of City Limits, a legacy of local NYC housing news. Also, very notably for us locally, Marjorie donated the absolutely wonderful Femfolio portfolio, which comprises, 20 works by 20 originally US-based feminist artists to the Women's Art Collection at Marjorie Edwards College, which I'm immensely grateful for because it makes teaching that much more rich and enjoyable. So thank you so much. And it's also been a great inspiration to Harriet and the programming that she's been doing here, including with the current exhibition, Goddess, Cyborg, Deity, is that the right order? Ish. Which the Mary Beth Edelson print inspired. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Marjorie to introduce Judith and Ferris, and then we'll get going. Thank you.
Well, welcome all. We're so delighted to be here tonight and to be with all of you. To be here at the Women's Art Collection at the Marjorie Edwards College, and I'm personally so honored to be with these two amazing women who I have known now for over, 25 years. And they are incredible feminine scholars, to say the least. I mean, Professor Judith Brodsky and Dr. Olin are two women who have worked promoting women artists probably actually since the 70s. And not only as gender non-conforming artists, but also artists from the African diaspora as well. Tonight's conversation actually began when I met Judy. In 2007, I was actually at a luncheon at the National Museum of Women of the Arts in Washington, D.C. And I was at that point thinking of doing a major international art fair called Art W at Art DC. And I was just so happy to meet Judy then. And unfortunately, that idea didn't quite work out, but many other things came from that. And the most important thing was that I met these two incredible women. And it would actually put me on this path with both of them starting that day. Both Judy and Ferris are distinguished professors. Judy was connected to the Visual Arts Department, and she is a fantastic printmaker. And she's also the founding director of the Brodsky Center at Rutgers University, which is now located at Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. Many of the prints from the Brodsky Center are actually at the Victoria and Albert Museum. Their print collection is terrific, and having many of the prints that the Brodsky Center has only added to that amazing collection. She also published the Rivington Place portfolio, and many of the artists that were included with that were Chris Feely, Hugh Locke, Glenn Ligon, Carrie Mae Wims, and the portfolio actually helped fund Rivington Place with a wonderful woman by the name of Jelaine Tawandos worked with her on this wonderful idea. Jelaine, by the way, now is at Whitechapel Gallery. The idea was to help fund the Institute for International Arts, which is ANIVA, and also Autograph, which is ABP, the Association of Black Photographers with Mark Seeley. Ferris Olin was the founding co-director with Judith Brodsky, creating the Institute for Women in the Arts at Rutgers University. And Ferris was also the curator of the Brodsky Center at Rutgers 3 decades, an amazing large-scale exhibit at the Zimmerli Art Museum. I was so fortunate to see it. It was phenomenal. And it documented over 400 artists that had been in residence during the center's years, including Ella Natsiri, Micheline Thomas, among Juan Quick to C. Smith, Byron Kim, Kiki Smith, and Richard Tuttle, but there were many more which they will go into. I'm going to turn the program over now to Judy and to Ferris, and they will talk more about what they have accomplished, and then I'll come back in and talk a little more about what I've done. But it's been an amazing collaboration for all these years, and what we've done together, I think, has been phenomenal to really make a difference to promote women artists and to give them the voice that they deserve.
Okay. So thank you so much, Marjorie. And it really is wonderful to be here tonight and to see what's happening here and to see this wonderful collection at Murray Edwards College. I just want to refer to the title of our presentation tonight because one of the things that we work on a lot is this whole restoring women artists to their rightful place in terms not just of their own histories, but their impact on the rest of the art world. And what has happened with women artists so often during the centuries is that their work is well known during their lifetimes, and then afterwards, as soon as they perish, then it gets lost. And so one of the things that I wanted to start out with was to tell you a little bit about the last book that I did called Dismantling the Patriarchy Bit by Bit, which was to restore the history of women artists to the development of digital art. And of course that started really with the whole digital art movement really starts here more than any other place in Europe or in the United States with the big show Cybernetic Serendipity, which was organized by Yasser Reichard. And so a woman was involved in the very beginning of digital art, which has mostly been something that's been forgotten. But I also wanted to say how wonderful it is to have had the experience of having a collaboration that's international. And if you can go to the next slide, please. What I wanted to do is show you this image, which is my first print that was feminist content. It's called Dish Rag Diagrammatic, and it is in the collection of the Victoria and Albert, of which I am very proud. So I am a printmaker, and that is one of my passions, and my other passion for many decades has been the promotion of women artists and their impact. And so I thought I would show you a little bit, just very quickly, of my work as a printmaker, and then begin to talk about the feminist projects that I've been involved with, which one of the culminating aspects of it has been the production of Femfolio, which is now in the collection of Murray Edwards College. Can I have the next one, please? Okay, thank you. So my work relates to what's going on in the world. Some people do not see that as feminist, but I see it as feminist because I believe my definition of feminism is that it is intersectional, and that women's role in our culture, in our society, in our humanness is obviously something that has existed forever. And so I feel that working on various aspects of science, for instance, or on ideas of philosophy, politics, all of this relates to being a feminist, and that and thinking in terms of as a woman, that I bring something to it that is special and that is important. So the next couple of slides are images from my series, the 20 most important scientific questions of the 21st century. And this was a series I did at the turn of the millennium, and they were quite different from the kinds of considerations that we have now. So it's kind of interesting from an historic perspective. So this one is called, Can Scientists Prove That There is a God? May I have the next one? And this one is called, this one is called, What is Gravity Really? And so that was a series that took me several years. I work in series, and may I have the next one, please? And so this is my latest work, which was done during the pandemic, and it looks as if I'm screaming, and when it's been written about, the way it's been described is that I'm screaming about the fact that I'm isolated during the pandemic and couldn't do the things that I usually would do. But I also work with images from my daily life. I'm also interested in using a little bit of humor and make it a little bit more complicated than it seems. So these photographs of myself in this series are actually selfies that I had to take because my teeth were being straightened. And during the pandemic, my dentist didn't want me to come into the office every 2 weeks for the new appliances. So she gave me a whole bunch of appliances all at once, and every 2 weeks I had to do a selfie to show her that I had put the new ones in. So here you can see my teeth are crooked, and not yet, but when you see the next one, you'll see that my teeth are straight. So at any rate, and then the costumes that are beside the self-portraits are costumes that my assistant at the time would come dressed in. And she had this tremendous wardrobe of retro clothes, flea market clothes that she had purchased, and she would come in these fabulous costumes, and I would photograph her because I said, these are works of art. You know, this is not something that should just be saved for posterity. And the whole idea, these two bodies of images came together for me to talk about exterior and interior of the body. That in my case, I'm having my teeth straightened, but you can interpret this in so many different ways. And as far as my assistant was concerned, she came in all these beautiful clothes, but she was actually ill with Crohn's disease, and at the time they were trying to adjust her medication, so some days she would just come and go to sleep on the couch in my studio. So in both instances, the outside was quite different from what was going on the inside. So the name of this series is Inside and Outside. If I could have the next one. And so here's the conclusion, and you can see that my teeth are now perfectly straight. May I have the next? Thanks. Okay. So just to give you an idea of a recent project that I'm involved in, this is a project in Philadelphia called Refocus, Philadelphia focuses on women in the visual arts, and it's an exhibition that I organized with my co-curator Diane Burko 50 years ago. And it was one of the first exhibitions of the work of women artists in a big survey. And we had 82 artists in the show back in 1974, and we were able to show work by 78 of those 82 in 2024. And it is a kind of a little reprise of the feminist art movement in the United States. You can see the big portrait by Alice Neal that was sort of one of the centerpieces of the exhibition. And it was very interesting for us to see how work had changed, how work had not changed, but also to restore the history, because there were so many artists in this show who became very well known, like the artist Faith Ringgold, whom many of you know just died this past week, unfortunately, and who is someone that Ferris and I have been friendly with for the last 50 years as well. May I have the next one? Thank you. So one of the things that's been true is we are collaborators. And the three of us found each other, and we've worked together in a lot of different ways, and I think that's one of the things that's been so exciting for us, and I think it's one of the aspects of the feminist art movement, both in the United States and here, which is so significant about the movement, and the idea of coming together, sharing concepts, developing them, using our various talents in ways that were appropriate. I think it's something that has been very significant. And I think you see it in the number of collectives that are now present in the art world, rather than the idea of the white male artist working as a genius on work that would then influence the world. May I have the next? So Ferris is going to talk with you about some of the other things that we've done together, but this has to do with a book that we did on women's leadership in the arts. We had to cover music as well, and theater. We covered entrepreneurship in the arts. And the image on the cover is by a Latinx artist named Yolanda Lopez, who died fairly recently, a couple of years ago, showing herself as the Virgin of Guadalupe, but here she is with running shoes and, full of energy and life and bursting out of the image. May I have the next? And we also were able to bring together women artists, women filmmakers, women poets, women composers from the Middle East for a set of exhibitions that we did in 2010. And it was one of the first exhibition projects in the United States that focused on the work of Middle East women artists. And finally, this past year, Ferris has curated an exhibition of the 30 years that the print center that I founded in 1986 was at Rutgers University. And during that period, over 400 artists were in residence, created 600 projects. But the print shop was really based on my feminist ideas because it was focused, its mission was focused on bringing women artists and artists of color and providing them with the opportunity to make prints, because at that time, printmaking studios with master printers and paper makers were only available to white male art stars. So the mission of the center was to work with women and artists of color. And so over the years, 60% of the 400 artists were women artists, and about 40% were artists of color. But my point also is that this was during a period of white male domination in the art world. So I'm really proud, I have to say, of having had an impact, because very often I would show prints at a museum, and of course prints are not as expensive as paintings or sculptures, and so it's easier to take some money from the budget and buy a print. And so very often the acquisition of a print that had been created at my studio was the first piece of art acquired by a museum of a living woman or a living artist of color. And next one, thanks. And this is just the big banner that was outside the museum, and that's me standing in front of it. And we have the next one. And then this is just a view of the interior of the exhibition. Next. And then our studio at one point was an all-women studio as well. It wasn't always an all-women studio, but I love this particular photo that shows us all around the printing presses. And the next one. And then these are some of the artists who were in residence. This is a piece by Willie Cole, African-American artist, and what he works with is the image of the underside of the iron, of electric irons, and you know, each brand of electric iron has a different pattern. So the iron, of course, is a symbol of domestic labor. His grandmother worked as a housekeeper for white families, and he uses the iron in ways that not only suggest domestic servitude, but also the way in which white culture categorizes. So the images that you see, which are life-size images, are actually the costumes that he designed are actually all based on the image of a particular iron. So he made several of these, and one is the Silex tribe, another one is the Sunbeam tribe, with the idea of satirizing the way in which anthropologists had characterized non-Western cultures. Next one. And then these are two pieces by Native American artist John Quick-to-See Smith, and she is the first artist to have her work acquired by the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., and the Metropolitan Museum of Art has also bought her work now. So on one side you see her image of a woman in full Indian dress with red, white, and blue feathers coming out of her pocket. And the title of that one is What is an American? Obviously questioning the absence of the recognition of indigenous peoples who lived in North America before white Europeans came. And then the other one is a handmade paper piece, which is about the stereotypes that society has of Native Americans, and the title of this one is Indian Men Wear Shirts and Ties. Next. And then this is Kiki Smith, and she is another feminist artist of note. I think she's well known here as well as in the United States. And she came to the studio, and we photographed her in this costume. And there were actually, one costume was about fall, and this one was about winter, this white one. And she, I asked her, I said, well, where's spring and fall? And she said, there's no more spring and fall. You know, I've had a big birthday. All that's left for me is fall and winter. May I have the next one? And Magdalena Campos Pons, who was a Cuban refugee, came across in small boats from Cuba to Florida when she was a young woman. And this print, which is also a lot of handmade paper in it, is about surveillance and who is surveilling whom. Is there the surveillance on the woman herself and on her back, or is she also surveilling the people who are surveilling her? Next one. And then this is Anne McCune, who is our paper maker, with an artist named Jakaya Booker, who created her own identity, in a sense, by wearing these wonderful costumes. And she does monumental sculptures using rubber tires. And so when she came to the studio, she made sculptural images that are all handmade paper, but they are three-dimensional and very much like the tire sculptures that she creates on a different scale. And the next, thank you. And then I just thought it would be interesting to show you some of the some prints by some of the artists from the UK that we worked with. We worked with Sir Frank Bowling. When he came to the studio, we thought he was going to do something with, that looks more like his map and abstract paintings, but instead he said that his mother was going to be 60 years old and he wanted to do an etching about her. And then Hugh Locke did this particular piece for the Rivington Place portfolio that Marjorie had mentioned, the next one, and Chris O'Feely, and then also Sonia Boyce, and the next, thank you, and also Isaac Julian. So it was really exciting this past week while we've been here in the UK to go to the various exhibitions in London and to be able to say, oh, here, we know this artist, or we know this artist. So this international aspect of this trip has been really thrilling, and this is the culmination, a wonderful culmination. And now I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Ferris Olin, who will tell you a little bit more.
Yes, I'm going to try to talk to you about some of the activities we've been involved with, and start out first with the erasure of women artists. Many of you have probably heard of the Guerrilla Girls. I know there's one of their posters in Marie Edwards. This is a different poster, which tells you that the whole story of art history is not the whole story of art history unless it includes women artists and artists from underrepresented populations. And the Guerrilla Girls were founded in 1985 when the Museum of Modern Art reopened. They opened a show that had no women artists at all. There were protests and pickets. I even still have the button that says, MoMA is open, but not to women. The Guerrilla Girls are anonymous women artists who take the names of, I call it the nom de guerre, of deceased women artists. They wear gorilla masks and they do actions. And they have a lot of humor, they do a lot of research, and you'll see their posters as an activist way of trying to inform people and raise their consciousness. There are now 3 sets of Guerrilla Girl groups, and one of them, I think Kati Kalowitz was here, is that right, Harriet? Yes, so some of you may have met a Guerrilla Girl. Back in 1951, here is the cover of Life magazine extolling the contemporary artists of the time, the abstract expressionist artists. You see one woman, that is Hedda Stern at the top. The reason that she's pictured is that she accompanied her artist husband to the photo shoot, and then they included her. And Hedda Stern said that she would be a very famous artist, but probably not until she was dead. And unfortunately, that proved to be true. Also, I paired it with the Art News cover story of 1980, about 30 years after the Life magazine, to show you that Art News was beginning to think about, and the art world in general, about women artists. And so they tried to sort of replicate the slide that you see from Life magazine. And I can identify a few artists just so you know. So there's Faith Ringgold in the center. On the bottom, you also have in the second row, Louise Bourgeois, and she's talking to Miriam Shapiro. And then Mae Stevens is the first woman in the third row on the left. And in the middle of the fourth row is a white-haired woman. That's Isabel Bishop, who had been a practicing artist since the 1920s. So it's 60 years after she was beginning. And she's also there is Audrey Flack, who just turned 93 and has had a number of shows recently. Back in 2005, the president of Rutgers University issued a call for proposals to demonstrate how the university was a center for excellence. And of course, Judy and I, being very entrepreneurial, we submitted a proposal to create an Institute for Women in Art that was for all Rutgers campuses, which are on 3 different cities throughout the state of New Jersey. We were funded to do this. There were only 2 humanities proposals that were funded. The rest were all science proposals. The president then announced that he had established and founded the Institute for Women in Art, and he appointed us to be the co-directors. And during the first decades, we organized many activities in collaboration with our colleagues, both in the visual arts and art history, but as well interdisciplinarily with our colleagues across many fields, including the sciences. This was our website with the Guerrilla Girls. We organized an exhibit for them and a big gala. And this show was one of 500 shows we organized under the aegis of the Mary H. Dana Women Artists Series, which was founded in 1971 by the abstract artist Joan Snyder, who was a graduate of Douglas College, the women's college at Rutgers University. She was very frustrated that she and her peers could not get gallery representation or be chosen for museum shows. So she went to the library director and proposed to take the library's lobby and make that an alternative art space for contemporary art by emerging and established women artists. That series, the Dana Women Artists Series, is now 50 years old. And I should say, at the time that she founded it, Douglas College, the largest women's college in the United States at that point, had an all-male visual arts faculty. And also, they only showed work by women artists. I know that because I'm a graduate, and I was there previous to the founding of the Women Artists Series. She wanted to make sure, Joan, that women students knew about contemporary art by women artists and had role models, which they didn't previously to that. Another activity that we had in the women, for the Institute for Women in Art was WAND, which is the Women Artists Archive National Directory. As scholars are trying to find research about women artists, primary source materials are difficult to find, and we were able to receive a grant from the Getty Trust to survey all the archival collections in the United States for American women artists born after 1945, and this directory is searchable and available for people to find. We also recognized, because so many women artists were coming to us to ask what to do about our papers and our bodies of work. So many artists make so many works of art, but they're not always collected by people and museums. So Judy and I decided to organize Etched in Memory Legacy Planning for Artists, a conference which, after we announced it, within 3 days, the pre-registration was totally sold out, and we filled an auditorium with about 150 people, but many more people were clamoring for it. And here you see in the bottom, Faith Ringgold talking about what her planning was for her legacy, and next to her is Doris Friedenson, who was the widow of an artist, and she wanted to talk about what to do as a survivor with the legacy of an artist who has been since deceased. As we were doing so many of our activities, we realized that we should produce a card that introduced people to all the women in art activities at Rutgers University, which, as you see, is here. And it was helpful later on when I will talk about Judy Chicago, meeting with her. She asked us, how did Rutgers become a feminist art university, a utopia? It's not a utopia, but we had a lot of wonderful things going on and about that. After we established the Institute for Women and Art, both Judy and I were each individually contacted by a group of ad hoc women artists who were looking towards 2007 as an anniversary year, and also as an establishment of something very important coming up. And they wanted to figure out how to reinvigorate feminist art. Some of the anniversaries included the Feminist Art Program, which was established by Miriam Shapiro and Judy Chicago, which culminated in the Woman House exhibit, in which students and the faculty took a dilapidated house in Los Angeles and made installations which were feminist installations. Another anniversary was the publication in 1971 of Linda Nochlund's germinal book, an essay, Why Have There Not Been Any Great Women Artists, which is included in this collection. And you see Linda Nochlund there inserted into the famous image. There was also soon to be the 20th anniversary of the National Museum for Women in the Arts. And lastly, the Dana Women Artist Series was going to be celebrating its 35th anniversary. And here's a print that Joan Snyder produced through the Institute and the Brodsky Center as a fundraiser for the Women Artist Series, just to talk about that. And lastly, the thing that everybody was thinking about was 2007, when the Center for Feminist Art was going to be opening at the Brooklyn Museum, and the permanent installation of the dinner party, which was created by Judy Chicago and about 300 other artists. And it had been stored in a warehouse for about 30 years. So we were all wanting to celebrate and think what we could really do. What we did is we got together and Judy Chicago, Judy Brodsky, and myself met in New Mexico and talked about what could be done. And out of that, we created something called the Feminist Art Project, TFAP. And we administered it at the Institute for Women in Art. And when the first inaugural project was How American Women Artists Invented Postmodernism, 1970 to 75. This was an exhibition Judy and I curated in 2005 and 6, the purpose of which was to make clear that much of the work of the feminist artists set the tone for postmodernism. For example, reintroduction of narrative in art after a long period of abstraction, new depictions of the body, evolution of performance art, video, and photography as the significant art forms, employment of novel materials to make art, elevation of pattern and decoration to high art, and expansion and use of installation. At the gala for the Feminist Art Project and that particular show, here are some of the pioneering women artists, many of whom produced works for the feminist, the Femfolio, and you can see they're there. This was the first time they'd gotten together in almost 50 years. The Feminist Art Project is an international collaboration that counters the erasure of women artists and recognizes the intellectual and aesthetic contributions to the cultural landscape. And one of the things we did with the Feminist Art Project was to partner with the College Art Association, the national, or it's actually international organization for art historians and artists who teach at university and colleges and other visual arts professionals who meet regularly. And every year there's a conference. And we partnered with CAA to establish 18 years ago that the Saturday of their conference, we would organize cutting-edge issues relating to feminist art. And here are some of the speakers from one of them. As a result of how American women artists invented postmodernism and the Feminist Art Project, Judy and I realized that we should commission some of those artists to produce prints for a portfolio suite of prints. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of those artists, but not all of those artists. The first is...
Okay, so this is Mary Beth Edelson, and I don't really need to say all that much about her in a sense because, of course, Harriet has created this wonderful exhibition on the goddess, and Mary Beth Edelson is really the ultimate in promoting the concept that women were not only goddess figures, but also were priestesses and were involved in religions, whereas the picture that comes out usually about the history of gods and goddesses is with an emphasis on the male figure rather than on the female. And may I have the next, please? So,
oops, sorry.
Yeah. So one of the Mary Beth Edelson's famous works is this print that she produced and it became a poster that was very, very widely distributed of the Last Supper, but now it is all the figures are substituted by women artists with Georgia O'Keeffe as Jesus and the other artists all gathered around the table. And so it's in one image, it's a picture of the feminist art world in the United States, and so many of the artists have become figures who have influenced the way in which art practice is carried on today. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Do you want to go back and talk about
yeah.
that?
So this is the image that Mary Beth created for Femme Folio, and you can of course see it when you go to see Harriet Loeffler's show, which is in that part of the college over there,
amazing.
and I would recommend that you
saw
go
it.
see it because it's really quite wonderful.
Yes. And I've mentioned Joan Snyder. Here you find her photographed in front of one of my favorite artists, works by Florine Stedheimer, who only had one show in her lifetime in 1916 and then was sort of lost for a long time. She was rediscovered when an art historian wrote her dissertation about her, Harriet, and Barbara Blomek is her name. And then she's done several exhibitions in New York with works by Florine Stedheimer. This is a work by Joan, made at the Brodsky Center. It's a pulp paper painting with fabric inclusions. And this is the work that she made for the Femme Folio.
Okay, this is Joan Semmel, and many of you may be familiar with her work because Joan is one of the artists who transformed the way in which the female nude was considered. And she did these marvelous paintings in the 1970s, in the early 1970s. Have the next one so that we can see it. Thank you. Which were images of the female body, and sometimes with the male body as well, seen from the point of view of the model herself, rather than the usual view, which we came to call the male gaze, which is the male artist looking at the female body. So these images were really revolutionary images in their time, and you can see Joan standing, in front of one of them, and she's continued to explore the female body from different perspectives. May I have the next one? Yeah. Particularly from the point of view of age, and this is her image in Femme Folio, which is the only photograph. I mean, she takes a lot of photographs, but this is the only one that she's ever allowed to be editioned or to be made public. So it's a very special one, and of course it's a self-portrait at the same time.
And here is Joyce Kozloff, who was an early proponent of feminist art and one of the major figures in pattern and decoration movement. She's a painter of murals as well as public art installation. She was a founding member of the Heresies Collective. This is an example of one of her commissions, public art installations. And for Femme Folio, she created this particular piece, which is representative of the work she'd been doing since 1990, in which she uses maps and cartography as a focus.
And this is Carolee Schneemann. And Carolee Schneemann is really one of the first important performance artists. And she, all her performances were feminist right from the start. Her most famous performance, I am not able to show you an image of. I didn't have one, and I went on the internet to find one. And what has happened on the internet over the last few months is that images of the nude body are being censored. And I was shocked to find this out, and I think we all have to, object to this somehow. But anyway, it's an image of the image that I could not find. I'm going to describe to you in words, which, is hardly adequate, but nevertheless, She comes out and she's nude, but she's painted her body with the colors of one of the figures in Picasso's Demoiselle d'Avignon. And then she gradually wipes all that off, and then from her vagina she pulls out a braided string of papers, and she opens them up and she reads stories about women. And it's a remarkable and extremely moving performance. And we have the next one. So then what I was able to find, because she's clothed in this particular one, this is her response, her feminist response to Jackson Pollock and to Jackson Pollock's drip paintings. But here she, as a woman artist, she's on a swing and she's swinging back and forth, and it's her body that creates the images on the wall.
I think we're talking about.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. And then this is her image in Femfolio.
I'm going to talk about Faith Ringgold, who passed away this past Saturday. And here you see her in front of her Tar Beach story quilt. On the left, my left, and I hope maybe it's your right at this point, you see the cover of the New Yorker with one of her images, which actually is a print that she made at the Brodsky Center. Faith was a painter, a printmaker, a storyteller, a children's book author, and many of you probably went to the Serpentine Gallery in 2019 in London, where she had a one-woman show. I hope you did. The Museum of Modern Art acquired this work of hers 50 years after she had created it, when they reinstalled their collection about 2 years ago. And it's in conversation with Picasso, because she talked a lot about how she looked at Picasso, and he inspired her as well. And I noticed on the walls of Murray Edwards there are several Faith Ringgold works, including this one from Femfolio, Coming to Jones Road. Jones Road is the street on which Faith lived, and where her studio was as well.
And this is an image of Eleanor Anton, an artist from California who is interested, and this goes back to the 1970s. So the fact that she's interested in gender fluidity at that time and doing images in video at that time. So here she is as the King of France, and she is interviewing her subjects on the street. But the whole idea in her work was to show these stereotypes and to deconstruct them. And they have the next. And her most famous work is this, which is called 137 Views, Sculpture, a Traditional Carving. And it was a satire on images of the ideal woman as a thin woman. And so what she did is she took pictures of herself over a month's dieting to show how she was carving her own body. Next. And then this is her image in Femfolio.
Here you see Miriam Shapiro, one of the founding mothers of the feminist art movement, as well as pattern and decoration. And this is a print she made actually at the Brodsky Center. It's exemplative of much of her work, in which she also referenced women artists. She started out as an abstract artist. This is her big ox. And she also was an artist who used computers in the 1960s to make art, which was very unusual at that time. And let me just read you what she said about this painting. Quote, "The painting is a very strong image with a seemingly neutral subject, the letter O superimposed on the letter X. The O was actually a hexagon with a pink labial interior whose geometry masked its sexual meaning," unquote. Shapiro was also an artist who was included in the White Cube show, which you may have seen last year, 2023, of Action, Gesture, Paint, Women, Artists, and Global Abstraction. And for her Femfolio piece, she created this court jester, and I'm just going to say that the dolls that you see there are dolls that she has rescued. She loved to collect dolls which were in garbage dumps or in consignment shops, and then used them in her art. So this is one of those pieces. She used the house shape, which she also used in her painting. And she also collected a lot of fabric and paper, and often attached them to her art as femage, she called it. And here you see lace, which is a reference to that.
And this is Harmony Hammond. And Harmony Hammond was one of the lesbian artists who was open about her sexuality at a very early date, and whose work, if I can have the next one, whose work, in her work, she tried to develop different forms of art making that were separate from the traditional forms, as having, in her view, being imbued with maleness. And so she worked a lot with fiber, and she worked a lot with floor pieces. And here you see one of her wonderful floor pieces, which is typical of her work. And the next one. And then this is her elegy, which is her print for Femfolio, and which was her comment on all the number of gay people who had died from HIV, and also the idea that gays were still denied their place in normal, everyday society.
This is Sylvia Slay, a Welsh-born artist who was based in New York City. She was known for reversing gender roles and produced a lot of wonderful portraits that sort of mimicked Anne Odalesque, but in fact they were male nudes. And like Judy, I looked for images of the Turkish bath to show you, but unfortunately they're not available anymore on the internet, so it's of the same kind of thing. But she was one of the founding members of AIR Gallery, the first women's art collective and cooperative gallery founded in 1971. And then she also joined Soho 20 Gallery, which was also one. And here is her portrait of all of the members of AIR Gallery, and her Femfolio piece of Douglas John with Mrs. Smith the cat. Douglas John, by the way, was the last of her studio assistants, and also took care of her in her later years, and he is responsible for preserving her legacy with her foundation. And now I'm going to turn the clicker over to you, Marjorie.
Okay.
Here.
Can you? So Art W was started actually in 2005 when I was working on a Smithsonian project, and I traveled the country putting together experts from the Smithsonian with individual cities. And as I was traveling, I saw all these galleries, and they were not, women, by the way, were running the galleries, but they would not show women artists. And I go, what is going on here? So I thought about it, and I sort of took this entrepreneurial thing, and I started Art W. And we did...
Just press the button.
Yeah.
There you go. That's...
What was wonderful is with the collaboration with Judy and Ferris, we started an Art W salon series. And I moved from California to New York and found a lovely apartment. And it was big enough to house all these wonderful people to come. And we had people like Judy Chicago, Faith Ringgold, Joan Snyder, Kathleen Gilgee. It was incredible what we were doing, and we had these phenomenal conversations, and we did a whole series of them. It was really quite, and people look forward to it. It was like, oh, when's the next one coming? It was great, so we were very pleased about that. Then what happened was, through some of my connections in the art fair world, I knew the people at Art Miami, and they asked me to do something on women artists, and we put together this wonderful discussion with Beth Lippman. We had a great artist, I can't even read this, Laurie Hyland, Ellen Dorfman from California. We just took a lot of different women who were actually being represented by galleries at the art fair, and then we brought it to everybody's attention. And that was great, and there was a great conversation. In addition to that, I took people on tours to actually see by disciplines, whether it was graphic, printmaking, or it was sculpture, or it was painting. I divided it up, and then I went through Art Miami and literally took collectors to sort of see what was going on, and it was wonderful. So that was a great thing. We did all that, and so that, I think, was a major success from that perspective. These are just some wonderful views. We had drinks, we had food. It was really great. They went out of their way to see this. And these were some of the speakers that we had, and I was in discussion with them. So, and Judy was there, of course. It was really quite wonderful. Then what I did is, one of the artists I represented and tried to work with was Anita Galesta, and she did this amazing piece called Watershed. And it was all about climate change, and this was the anniversary of Sandy, 5th anniversary, so we went out and we got the city involved, Brooklyn, and all these public policy people from the government, what are we going to do? This was a major problem, and they really hadn't worked to any way that we could see with a plan. We were hoping that with showing Watershed in front of the public library, that it would actually help to bring the attention to this very important issue. And interesting enough, Ferris and I were just talking, and honestly, they haven't really moved the dime that much. So great piece, great discussion, nothing came out of it, which is unfortunate. And now being at City Limits, I see that even more readily, and it's really frustrating. But this is Watershed. It's beautiful. It was actually also here in England on the face of the National Theatre as well. Then I came up with another idea, and which is really connected to my passion, a number of my passions, and that is very much travel and very much exposing people not just to the visual arts, but to women who do amazing things in all the arts, and putting it together. And so we had everybody from somebody by Julie Cunningham, who's phenomenal, and she's now with Sadler Wells, Subhan Davies, who actually had her own studio and did the actual piece for Julie that she danced to. It was incredible. Then we had Sky Gengel, who's an amazing Michelin star chef, and we went to Somerset and we did that, Somerset House. It was 9 days, by the way, of incredible discussion, visual bombardment of all these wonderful things, and just a wonderful way to have intimate conversations with these incredible women that I chose to honor as part of Art W. And so the list went on. Debbie Hilliard, who was today the actual Senior Global Director of Education at Hauser & Wirth. At that point, she was just in charge of education. Labaina Hamid was originally going to be, but then she won the Turner when I asked her to do this. And so she then suggested that I ask Ingrid Pollard, who's phenomenal and has recently won the Hasselblad Award. Tali Pellman, interesting story. She is an executive producer who actually did Tina the musical, and she talked about Adrienne Warren, she talked about Tina Turner, she talked about that whole journey of bringing it all together. It was phenomenal. She's just a great person. Through Ferris and Judy, they introduced me to Gil Saunders, who is at the V&A and was running the print center and showed all the amazing prints, and she had it all up on the walls. We loved it. It was just great. Then also Sabina Savage, which is why I'm wearing this beautiful scarf, but I had chosen her because I just loved her work, but she actually became the leading designer in 2019, and I was so pleased that we had her, and she talked about how she did these amazing drawings, and it all came from, botanicals and birds and paintings, and then what she did is she literally had them printed, and she had it done in Italy, and they backed it with whether it was silk or, cashmere or whatever it was anyway, but that was Sabina. Ange Smith, I was very fortunate to realize I needed help as to who was really fantastic, and I made a very nice relationship with Hauser and Wirth, and they suggested Ange Smith, who just recently became part of their stable in 2019. And both Judy and Ferris and I went to the Mount Street, which is their new restaurant they have, and Ange did this amazing, beautiful ceiling, so that was great. And then Jelaine Tawandos, who was running DAX at that point, did a great discussion with Ingrid Pollard, so it was great. And did I miss anybody?
No, I think you should go on.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Okay, so anyway, it's just great 9 days, phenomenal.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to.
The blog?
Yeah, and then
That's for you.
Then after that, I had already planned another one, and of course the pandemic happened, and like we all, it was like I wanted to create some community. So I had this wonderful global network that I had begun, and I just called all these great artists in different disciplines, and we have Fionn Gunn here today, who was actually in the blog, but there were so many wonderful people. Renata Bertelman, I had a lot of help from Richard Saltoon, and they gave me a lot of artists, and everybody wanted to talk and talk about what they were going through, and the fact that many of their exhibits were canceled, and what they were doing, and how they were dealing with it. And I made sure everybody knew everybody else, and they could talk if they wanted to, and it was a great experience. I think it helped us all, and there were 20 artists in total that we did, and I think it helped me very definitely to get through it, and so that's what it was.
Great. So we're going to conclude now, but I have a few just remarks. First of all, I think Marjorie did not make it clear that she did a series of firsts. And if you think about the fact that what she did in Miami, Art Basel, with a seminar and tours of the work of women artists at a major art fair, and if you look at Frieze and other art fairs today and the way in which they're focusing on women artists, but Marjorie was the first to do that. Also, if you think about tours, all the wonderful tours that go on in the world of travel, and they're always focused on the great works of art by men. And so what Marjorie did again was to say, well, let's not do that once more. Let's do something that focuses on women. So I just wanted to say that you don't give yourself enough credit in terms of what you've done as a pioneer in terms of making women's achievements visible. So I just want to conclude and say that I think what you're seeing here in the three of us is behind the scenes of the United States feminist art world. You probably knew many of the artists that we talked about, the late Faith Ringgold or Miriam Shapiro or Judy Chicago. But it takes more than the artists. It also takes the women like us, who are behind the scenes and who are creating institutions, who are suggesting ideas that haven't been put forward yet. And one of the examples that I think of is how we help to promote these ideas around the world. It's not enough for the artists to create them, and the work also has to get out there. And it's curators like Harriet Loeffler, also who are doing work that enables people to see the achievements of women artists. So my conclusion is the glass half empty or half full? I think it's half full. But I'm also an optimistic type of person. I think that the current world situation is terrible for women, but somehow I think we'll come out of it. And I think that artists represent what's happening in the world and help us to cope with it. So, may I have the next slide, please? So, if you look at the Venice Biennale, which just opened this week, and I put this particular slide together before all the announcements were made of the various pavilions, but you can see the list of women that are featured in the Venice Biennale pavilions even before the total array of pavilions was announced is really quite remarkable. So I feel that we've accomplished a lot. I think there's some distance to go, but I think we're on the way. Thank you. Did we do it?
Yeah. 10 after
10 after 7?
Well, thank you. I think the three of you are a total powerhouse. I mean, what you have achieved together and apart is absolutely extraordinary. We're going to open it up to about 2 questions from the audience. So while you're all thinking about some questions, I'm going to take the privilege to ask a question, if that's okay. So I should say that I'm also Harriet Loeffler, the curator of the Women's Art Collection. And I have been incredibly fortunate to be working with the Femfolio, which is just such a wonderful gift in so many ways. But we recently had a conference here, a symposium, which was all about the Women's Art Collection. And I think one of the enduring questions that really came out of the discussions and the papers was that we need to find sort of alternative methodologies when we look at the work of women artists. That actually the kind of how we research, how we pay attention, how we disseminate information as well and try and uncover stories is kind of not fit for purpose in some ways. So I just wondered, maybe to Ferris and Judith, if you could talk about what strategies or kind of methodologies you feel that you've used or sort of advice to curators that want to...
I'll just say that when we had the gala with all the women artists, the feminist pioneers, we also announced, and I just didn't want to talk about it here, the establishment of the Miriam Schapiro Archives on Women Artists. Since 1986, I've been actively trying to get women artists to deposit their archives to various archival collections so that they can be found, because I had noticed that as an art historian, I could never find primary source materials about artists and scholars. So we have amassed a collection of women artists and women's art organizations at Rutgers, but also because of the Women Artists Archive National Directory WAND, we've sort of catalyzed archival collections which had warehouse papers of women artists to process them and make them accessible. And I think that's one way, an activist strategy to change institutions and provide. And as we were walking here, I read an article which just dismayed me to no end. We talked about Mary Beth Adelson, who's the primary and first artist, right, that you're doing with your Goddess to Cyborg. And in the latest Art News Net that just came out, a daily electronic newspaper, there was a big headline. Apparently, Mary Beth has been dead for a while, and we have there are a lot of people who've worked to get her archives digitized through the Feminist Art Institute and other things, and she's represented by a gallery in New York City. Well, her son decided to clean out her house and her studio, and he took all of her papers and anything else he found and put them on the sidewalk for anybody to pick up as garbage. And this is pretty much outrageous as far as I'm concerned. And so I'm going to encourage all of you who are artists in the audience here to please make sure you figure out where you're going to put your papers so you're not erased from history.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect answer to the question. So does anybody have any questions from the floor? We have some mics here and a mic at the back, so don't be shy. Yeah, you have one. Oh, we've got one at the back too. So should we take this one at the front and then we'll take Alex at the back and then, thank you.
I was wondering if you have any, can you hear?
No,
Yes,
it's not on.
It's not on.
No.
And you have to put it close to your mouth.
Now?
Yes.
Yes, good.
I was wondering if you have any call to action for non-artists
Yes.
to help you make your goals.
Buy art by women.
Yeah.
And also donate it eventually to public institutions so that it gets seen by broader audiences. There's a big problem in the art world anyway, is when private collections get developed and then stay private, and then the work never gets out. So that's a part of collecting, of thinking of how to get it out into the public as well. So that would be my primary advice to non-artists, and to encourage regional artists, because they were wonderful artists. We have such good art schools and good art training at universities as well. And so the quality of art that's being made at the moment is absolutely extraordinary, I think. And so I would encourage, to think in terms of developing collections that have regional artists in them, and also prints, if I may say so, as a printmaker. And the prints are so undervalued as an important aspect of art making. And so many artists have used printmaking as their mode of experimentation. And so prints are really exciting things to purchase, because they really represent the artist's thinking in the same way that drawings do. So I would encourage, as I said, buy art, make collections, and make them public eventually.
And to Judy's point, that was the reason that I chose the Women's Art Collection to give Femfolio, that I wanted to make sure that it had a much greater exposure than at my apartment or whatever. I just felt like it was too important. And so I made, as part of Women We Create, one of the programming, part of it was to meet Harriet and some of the artists from the Women's Arts Collection, and that's when I donated it. And I couldn't be happier. And it's wonderful to see the wonderful exhibit that you put together, and utilizing some of these wonderful prints as a jumping off point to do a much bigger exhibition around it. And I hope to see more of that in the future.
I can definitely say you will. Alex, you had a question at the back.
Yes, is this working? Can you guys hear me? Yeah.
Can
You can't
hear
hear me. Do I need to make it even
Yes,
closer?
that's much better.
So I was really inspired by your stories of collaboration. And I think in part to Harriet's point about the methodologies that we need to examine women's art making, I think by looking at the collaborative, creative context in which art is being made, we can excavate women's histories better, but also make a better art history more broadly. And there's people like Amy, for example, who are already doing that and paving the way for the rest of us. So on that theme, I was wondering if you could speak a bit more about collaboration and its role in your professional lives, and maybe even say how you guys met and what was the kind of genesis point for this amazing professional moment.
I can talk about how we first met. We met in 1976. Judy had been elected the third president of the National Women's Caucus for Art. As part of her agenda, she decided to create state chapters, and she called a meeting to create a Women's Caucus for Art for New Jersey. I went to that meeting. That's where I met her. And I was already on the faculty at Rutgers. She was not yet on the faculty at Rutgers. She was at a school that's now called Arcadia University. It used to be called Beaver College. And when she came to the university, maybe you want to talk about that, but go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, she was in the art department, but she was also a university administrator at another campus. And then she decided, according to her, that she wanted to make art, she missed that. And so she founded the Brodsky Center, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when we started collaborating. The year that she founded the Brodsky Center, I was then the associate director of the Institute for Research on Women. I've been involved in different kinds of research institutes, and we received a large grant to make sure that all of the state colleges and universities, humanities and social sciences courses would be revamped and transformed to include a new scholarship on gender, race, class, ethnicity, and sexuality. There was an extra chunk of money for anybody on the faculties who wanted to apply for an individual grant. And Judy and I began to concoct, and being very entrepreneurial, a course that would be revamped at Rutgers on 20th century American art by focusing on 2 women artists who were in their 80s and 90s, and have the students learn about the history of 20th century American art through their lives and works.
That's right. What I would say is that you can also work from within institutions, and it's possible to change. So when I came back to teaching after administration, 2 things were true. One is that I knew how to manipulate the university a little bit, which was pretty good. And so I knew that there are things you can do that you may not think of otherwise, and you know how the budgets all work, and you know that you can propose certain kinds of courses because there are these courses that have sort of vague names, and you can pretty much do whatever you want in them, even if they've got an official name. And so you can work within as well as working from the outside. And that is not to denigrate the outside, because you need the outsiders also who are pressuring the institutions. But the institutions themselves need change, because they're the things that pass on all the information and the ways of living. And so you want to have them be what you want them to be. So I think it's really important to think in terms of changing one's institutions as well as without. And also, one other thing we learned is that sometimes you can go ahead and do something and get reprimanded afterward, whereas if you talk about it beforehand, you're never going to get to do it.
Right.
What a great note to end on. So I hope that you will all join us in the foyer, where there will be drinks will be served, and there's an opportunity to ask more questions there. Before we go, I wanted to just flag up 2 events that are happening as part of the Goddess, the Deity, and the Cyborg exhibition, one of which is a symposium on the 7th of May. And we have a keynote speaker, which is Professor Jenny Klein, who's coming over from America.
And was involved with the Feminist Art Project.
Exactly. So it seems a kind of perfect event to be publicising. So we have a symposium all day on the 7th of May, which also culminates in the launch of the publication that we've made that coincides with the exhibition, which will include a reading by Banu Kapil, who has contributed to the book. And then on the 9th of May, we have a brilliant In Conversation event between Marina Warner, Amy Tobin, and Alice Butler. So I really hope you'll join us for that, which is part
Fantastic.
of a collaboration that we're doing with the Fitzwilliam Museum, bringing their William Blake exhibition in dialogue with our exhibition here. So I hope you will all join me in a warm round of applause and a great thanks to Judith, Ferris, and Marjorie.
Thank you.